Wild day. As a general rule, I'm a pretty early riser. I'm usually up about 5 a.m. Pacific time. I just think it's to try to stay on that East Coast schedule, to try to make sure I don't miss anything early in the morning. I was a little slow on Wednesday morning, okay? And I wake up to a text from a listener of this show. He has my cell phone. He's done some work for me. He's a great guy. I don't want to say his name. I don't want to put him on the spot, but you know who you are, my man. And the text message said, "Oh man, AT, sorry for your loss." And I freaked out. I was like, what is it? What do you mean sorry for my loss? It's 5:45 in the morning. The sun isn't even up yet. And I freaked out. I really did. And in all seriousness, I started thinking, like, did something happen? And then I was like, wait a second. This guy, while he is a loyal listener to this show, and I appreciate him and all of you who listen, he doesn't know my family. Like, did something happen with my family that I don't know about? And then I was like, did I say something on the podcast and he's just catching up and I said something? And then I go on Twitter and I realized that what he is referencing, and again, shout out to you, my man, I appreciate your support, is that UConn football has canceled their football season. And for people who do not know the background, I am in fact a UConn alum. I was there in the late 2000s when the football team was actually good. The basketball team was obviously very good as well. Great school. I'm a proud alum. And obviously, look, the last couple of years, UConn football has hit on some really hard times. And so on Wednesday morning, they made the announcement that they are canceling the 2020 football season. It's obviously big news because while it's one thing when the Ivy League cancels, the Patriot League postpones, on and on and on and on and on, UConn becomes the first FBS school to cancel their football season. And obviously the first thought is, and this is what happens on social media, everybody freaks out. This is a sign that college football is screwed and it's a disaster and we're never going to play a game. And let me explain to you why I actually don't think that's the case at all, why I think UConn's a very unique circumstance, and what it means for both UConn going forward. As an alum, I know a lot of people there. I know a lot of people behind the scenes, but then also what it means for college football as a whole. And so for people who do not remember, the most important thing you need to understand about this whole situation is that UConn football is an independent. They obviously came to the FBS about 15 years ago. They were part of the Big East. When the Big East broke up, Big East football obviously no longer exists, as Syracuse went to the ACC, Pitt went to the ACC, Rutgers went to the Big Ten, Boston College went to the ACC. Big East football breaks up, and UConn is kind of left without a home for their football program. So for years, they went to that AAC conference with South Florida and Central Florida. Shout out to the Civil Conflict Trophy, by the way. You guys know what I'm talking about. And all those other schools, Memphis and Navy, and I said South Florida, Tulsa, East Carolina, on and on and on and on and on. And what had really happened over the last year or so, I've talked about it many times, but UConn kind of had a crossroads moment over the last couple years where I think the administration kind of came to the understanding we are not going to compete at the highest level of football. We're not going to be able to compete, especially in the AAC, and that's no disrespect to the programs in that conference, but that's just the reality. And so we really have to look out for our best interests in basketball, because interest in basketball, well, I think it's there. Fan interest, ticket sales had suffered, not only because the team was bad, but because you're in a conference that fans can't wrap their arms around. Rob Douster and I will talk about it later, but as a UConn fan growing up, and I don't even live there anymore, but you get so excited about playing St. John's and Seton Hall and Syracuse and all those teams in the old Big East, it was hard to wrap your arms around Houston and SMU and Memphis and South Florida, even when those teams were good. And so a year or so ago, UConn makes the announcement that they are going to the Big East in all sports except for football. And obviously what that means is that football has to find a new home. There is no Big East conference for football. And so they went independent. And even at the time, people were asking me about it, DMing me, what does this mean, Torres? And what I said is, you kind of had to sacrifice football to save the basketball program, and it really sucks. And UConn actually has a very loyal fan base that does love the football program, and I'll get into that in a minute or two down the road. But you had to sacrifice football to get basketball to its natural home in the Big East, or the fear was that you're always going to fall behind the eight ball because, again, with all due respect to the AAC, when we're talking about them even as a basketball conference, Memphis is good, Houston is good, Wichita is good, but it's just not the same as the Big East. And so obviously when you leave for the Big East, it sets you up as an independent in football, and it created some logistical hurdles. And I will say, I'll give a ton of credit to the administration at UConn because they actually filled out the schedule pretty nicely, all things considered. They got some of those big bye games where they go on the road and get beat up for a lot of money. They're playing at Clemson next year, Ohio State down the road. But they also got some home and homes with some pretty good Power 5 mid-level teams that maybe someday they can compete with. Indiana was supposed to come to UConn this year. North Carolina is a home and home with UConn. I'm trying to think. Illinois, Indiana, I said. So I bring all this up to say Virginia was the other one. Virginia was the other one that was a home and home. And so UConn actually did a nice job of filling out the schedule. Where the problem came in is this little pandemic hit, and it's shaken up everything in college sports, as I've talked about on this podcast for literally 5 months now. And UConn was in a really bad spot because as more and more of these conferences decided to go to league-only games, to a +1 model in the ACC or the Big 12, it left UConn really scrambling to put together a football season. For people who do not know UConn's schedule, and I would not expect you to, 4 games on their schedule had already been canceled. They had 2 against the Big Ten, Indiana and Illinois. They had 1 against the SEC. They were supposed to play at Ole Miss. And they had an FCS game that was canceled because of decisions made at the FCS level. And so UConn already had 4 games canceled, already was going to potentially lose 2 more with the 2 ACC teams on the schedule. And I think the UConn administration just looked at this situation and said, it is not realistic. I don't want to say it's unrealistic for us to play football, but how much scrambling can we do? How much, duct tape and glue and bubble gum can we patch up with this thing? We've already lost 4 games. We're probably going to lose 2 more, and it's just impossible to put together a reasonable schedule that's going to get our fans excited, that's going to get our players excited, that we're potentially going to play because maybe it means traveling across country, and who knows what that means if we're playing even, say, a Big 12 or a Sun Belt team that maybe would have an opening in the schedule. And so I think UConn just looked at the situation and said, frankly, it's untenable. It's not possible. And I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of these other independent programs, UMass is one, Liberty is one, kind of comes to the same conclusion. It's just really hard to put together a schedule when so many of these leagues are going to conference only. And so that is why UConn did it. They had already lost 4 games. They were set to lose 2 more. And I think the other bottom line is that part of this was money related. UConn won't say it. They won't say it publicly, but I do think some of this is financial. If UConn had a team that was in the top 25 that was capable of winning every game on their schedule, I do think they would be continuing to try to piece together a schedule to give something for people to be excited about, whether it's fans with the hope that maybe down the road in October or November we can let fans into the stadium, and certainly the TV partners, because if UConn could piece together a schedule, if they were a good team, that would make the TV partners happy. But when you have 5 Power 5 teams on your schedule, none of them are going to play you, and you stink. Obviously, the TV partners are not lining up to fill their schedule with UConn versus Army or UConn versus UMass or whomever else they could have potentially gotten on the schedule. And so when you look at it from all this perspective, I do think part of it was money. The team wasn't going to be very good, and it is going to be really expensive to conduct football this season. I think when you look at all the variables, when you look at all the factors, just think about it. Just think about the fact that even if they were to piece together a 6, 7, 8 game schedule, you're still talking about 3, 4 road trips. You're talking about charter planes. You're talking about overnight flights. Or overnight stays in a hotel that for 70, 80, 90 people. And I think when you look at that, when you look at how expensive testing is, when you look at how expensive it would be to continue to test all season long, and this week you got to quarantine this many guys, and this week you got to cancel it, and you don't have that big TV money coming in because you're not a member of the Big Ten or the Pac-12 or the SEC, I do think it's a factor. And for people who will say, oh, come on, they didn't just cancel it for dollars and cents. Well, think about it like this. UConn hasn't canceled a single other fall sport yet. I thought that was the most interesting part of the press release that nobody talked about, which was that UConn has not canceled their other fall sports. Well, if you look at their other fall sports, they have two things going for them that football doesn't. Three things, really. One, the rosters are way smaller. So whether you're talking about a soccer team, a volleyball team, a field hockey team, it's a lot easier to test and retest 20 field hockey players than it is 85 football players and another 20 guys on the coaching staff. That's one. Two, playing in the Big East, all those other teams have much more manageable schedules in terms of driving and getting set up. And you could take a bus to Providence and come back the same night. You can take a bus to St. John's and come back the same night. You don't have to stay in a hotel. It's much more easy travel, especially if you're going to a league-only schedule. And then the third thing, and I hate to say it, those teams are actually really good. Field hockey just won a national championship a few years ago. Soccer is good traditionally, both the men's and women's teams. And so is that the only factor? No, but I do think that's an interesting element of it. Is everyone saying, oh, they can't proceed going forward. Well, then why is soccer still playing? Why is field hockey still playing? And those may eventually be canceled, but I thought that was worth mentioning. That is also, by the way, why I would say that I don't believe that this is a terrible sign for college football, right? That's what we do. When I logged onto social media to see what all the hubbub was about, when I got that text message that scared the crap out of me, the first thing I did was I saw the reaction of, oh my God, this is the latest sign, college football is screwed. And the best thing that happened to UConn, the best thing that happened to all of our psyches, is that literally like 10 minutes later, the Big Ten released their football schedule. And I'm not going to get into all of it right now. I don't really have that many hot takes on the Big Ten football schedule, but I thought it was a good sign for college sports and college football specifically. The Big Ten's planning on being on the field 1 month from when you listen to this. September 5th is the openers for the Big Ten, and it's obviously August 6th as you listen to it. So this idea that UConn is some sign that we're not going to get football is just a non-starter. The bottom line is UConn, I don't want to exactly compare it to the Ivy League. If you remember a few weeks ago when the Ivy League canceled their fall sports, what did I say? I said, look, the Ivy League loves their football. Harvard, Yale, we all get it. It's a big deal. But it ain't LSU, Bama. It ain't Ohio State, Michigan. It isn't even USC, UCLA. And in terms of the financial benefits of playing versus canceling a season, it's much easier for the Ivy League to do it. It's much easier for the Patriot League to do it because the bottom line is you're just not making as much money playing football as you are if you're in the SEC or the Pac-12 or the ACC or the Big Ten. And so because of it, I do believe that the Power Five are going to continue on. I do believe that they're going to do everything they can. And I don't believe that this UConn thing has anything to do with anything other than the fact that they just don't have enough opponents and financially it doesn't make sense for them to keep playing. I thought it was very interesting, by the way, UConn's former conference, the Big East, on the same day that UConn canceled their season, the AAC said, we're still going to press forward with 8 conference games, and if you can get 4 out of conference games, you're encouraged to continue to play those games. So I don't think this UConn thing has anything to do with college football as a whole. And as we wrap up here, the last thing I really want to say on UConn is this, is that I feel bad for the kids. And I know UConn's been a punching bag in football for a very long time, for the last 5, 6, 7 years. But the kids in that program are working really hard, and the kids in that program care. And the kids in that program have worked their whole careers to get the opportunity to run through that tunnel 12 times this year. And I know that in the UConn press release, they did the big thing of it's a team decision and there's unity. BS. There's not 85 guys in that locker room that are all 100% happy that they're not playing this year. There's a lot of guys that I'm sure wanted to risk it. There's a lot of guys that I'm sure wanted to play. A lot of the seniors and older players know that this will be their last opportunity to play. And on the flip side, I think some of the younger guys wanted an opportunity to get on the field and prove they belong. So I feel bad for them. And I'll be honest, the last group that I feel bad for is honestly UConn fans. I think I've said it on this show, but my mom and my stepdad are season ticket holders at UConn football. UConn fans do care about UConn football, even if the product has not given them a reason to be excited over the last couple years, and that's the most disappointing part. I mentioned I went to UConn, and when I was at UConn was good. UConn was in the top 25. Now, were they LSU? Were they Bama? Were they Ohio State? Of course not. But they were a top 25, fringe top 25 program. They won 9 games a couple times, and they put guys in the NFL. Dan Orlovsky was there for a year or two when I was there. NFL quarterback for whatever it was, 10, 12 years. Donald Brown, running back for the Colts, was a very good NFL player who was there when I was there. Darius Butler, who played about 10 years with the Colts and the Patriots. I used to play pickup basketball with that guy. He's awesome. Tyvon Branch, Robert McClain, this kid Kendall Ray. There were so many guys that were really good players, and the program was a source of pride at UConn. And so I don't know what it'll take to get back there. I don't think UConn will ever be the elite of the elite, but it really wasn't that long ago that they were a really respectable program and, frankly, kind of a beacon for programs coming off the grid and proving that you can compete in this sport. Again, I don't know what it'll take. I do think that with time they can be a respectable 6-6, 7-5 bowl type team because of the support that they get from the state and because of the fact that, let's be honest, they're going to have the opportunity to schedule in some wins as long as they're an independent. But I do feel bad for the kids on the roster. They do deserve better.